Hey, this is JT, and welcome to another episode of The Critical Thought. You know, many times Jehovah's Witnesses often brag about how we are the same all over the world. We will be studying the same watchtower. Well, that might be true, but it also means something else as well. And that is, you will be treated the same way all over the world. And that's what the experience that we have today of someone who really highlights that it doesn't matter what country you're in. If you are one of Jehovah's Witnesses, you will find a very similar experience. This is an experience of a person who literally grew up as a Jehovah's Witness, his father serving overseas in a different country when he was even born. And so this is someone who comes from a very, very theocratic family. And we're going to see exactly what he experienced. And we think that his experience is kind of unique because it really touches on just showing once again, every individual, his life is touched in some way, some fashion by this religion, and it's not always in a positive light. Well, welcome to Jonathan as he shares with us his story.
You're listening to The Critical Thought, where we challenge our listeners to use critical thinking when examining the teachings of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Okay, so Jonathan, we want to welcome you to The Critical Thought.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Glad to have you on.
So, Jonathan, you have such an interesting story. I mean, I've got like a 3-page write-up about everything you've been through, and I'm sure this is not everything. But what I'd like you to do is start out by telling our audience a little bit about you and your family and, your introduction to the Jehovah's Witness faith.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I was born into being a Jehovah's Witness. My parents were born and raised for the most part. Early stages in their life, they were brought in, their parents had somebody knock on the door and, brought them in that way. So I grew up, I was born in Central America, Honduras, and I lived there for 3.5 years, at which point, my dad had difficulties with employment there, and so financial difficulties, and had to move back to the UK because my dad's British. And then I spent pretty much the majority of my life there up until recently, the last 5-6 years where I live in the US. But I pretty much spent a lot of my time as a witness. And then I started having issues when I was a teenager. I was baptized at 11, which, looking back, never should have happened. Never should have been allowed, for that matter. And from that point on, the reality of life kicks in as a teen, and all the peer pressures and things, and things got really difficult. School in general was hard, not just for being, a foreigner that didn't look like everybody else, but for being a witness. There was a lot of bullying, a lot of issues. And so, life was pretty difficult in the early years.
Yeah, I was just wondering, you said that as a kid, what was the biggest challenge that you would often run into in school that you personally found that you had to deal with, which is kind of adults, witnesses don't experience this. But as a kid, kids, as we know, kids can be cruel.
Oh, yeah.
They can be cruel, man. So what did you run into when you were in school? I know here in the United States, we had an issue with flag salute and things of that nature. Singing religious songs sometimes in school. How was it in the UK? Because it's a little different.
So my biggest issues were, number one, being a witness. The witnesses in the UK are generally not looked upon in favor. And obviously, knocking on doors, I was bound to run into classmates that lived at certain houses, and you'd see you there, and then you'd feel that instant oh no feeling. But then in school itself, there was things like assemblies and singing hymns, church songs, and I can remember to this day that I was escorted out because my parents had instructed the teachers not to have me in those, and I would be allowed to sing anything like that. And it just drew all the kids in the assembly hall's attention on me as like, why is this kid being dragged out? And, when they realize it's because I'm a witness, it just encourages more hatred. Some kids are okay, but for the most part, you have the typical, I don't want to stereotype people, but the typical classic kid that would just focus and bully somebody. That was really hard. I was isolated from certain things like those kind of events. Eventually, my parents saw that doing that wasn't good for me. But they sent me into the assemblies afterwards, but I was still not going to sing. So I was stood there, everybody else is singing and I'm not, and they're still looking at me. So it was still not fun in that respect for me.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, it's kind of ironic. But let me make sure I understand. You were singled out. Was this like before the program started, or was because everybody saw you leaving as opposed to just being on the edge and just heading out the back door, as it were? I mean, what was were they started the program or something?
Yeah, it started already, and everybody was singing, and I was just stood there, and then eventually a teacher come and grabbed me and escorted me out to another area, and yeah, that was it.
Oh wow! They put you on blast.
But you would have thought that they could have planned that a little bit better, because it's like the kids who will not be, participating in Valentine's Day and stuff like that, and then they know right off the bat that they're going to just go to the library or some other study hall area. So for them to make this a theatric in front of all these kids, maybe your parents didn't tell them to do that. Maybe they decided to do that, the teachers.
Maybe. I don't recall or don't remember that detail, so I'm not sure what my parents instructed at that time.
Yeah, it's actually, as some would say, it's that dreaded school brochure. I remember, oh my goodness, I hated when my parents would come out, my mom did anyway, would come out and tell the teacher, JT will not be doing this. And it was like, oh my goodness. And that's what every witness parent was instructed to do, to go to the school, give the teacher the little brochure, and this is a list of all the things. And you would get some teachers, they got 35 students, 30 students. They ain't got time to remember what every little child does and does. And I know parents, I know teachers who be like, oh, it's right. They can't do this. And they'll jump up and they want to make sure they're in compliance with what the parents want. And of course, you as a child, you're the one who got to deal with the brunt of it. And yeah, I remember, oh man, and you would try to stand there and fake like you, not really, you wouldn't put your hand on your heart. You just kind of stand there and, because you didn't, none of us wanted to be the one that stood out. And like you said, you would, some kids were cool, but there was always those ones who they would be ready for you, especially on Monday morning. If you saw them on the weekend, man, you're like, oh man, they're going to school.
But what I also find, and because I went to many schools being raised as a military brat, and I felt like sometimes the teachers were part of the bullying. Because, and that's one of my biggest things, as an activist now, is I like to talk to educators right now and letting you all know, if you are an educator and you have a Jehovah's Witness in your class, and even not just a Jehovah's Witness, any child that goes against the grain of which your society does, keep in mind that these children don't even understand most of the time that what their beliefs are. All they are is being born in a family that has a specific type of worship, and they're going along because this is all they know. As a kid, you do what you're told. And so for a child to go to a school system, room with all their peers, and then a teacher, being part of the bullying, is probably one of the worst things that you could ever experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, because I remember there would be teachers and just in talking to people and even growing up, where the teacher will often ask, well, why can't you eat the cupcake? and witnesses kids don't understand, the birthday thing. And you'll get Jehovah's Witness little kids. They'll just say, John the Baptist got his head cut off. And now they make you look like an absolute idiot in class. You're almost like
Right.
head cut off. And so it just compounds. It just makes it worse. I mean, and for people who are watching, and there'll be so many people, man, watching this video who are going to be sitting here saying, you got that right. That was me. And that's why I think it's so important that people get a chance to see all around the world, anybody who fed from the Watchtower trough, they pretty much had to deal with the same things, especially as young people. Same thing, same thing. Amazing.
So let's fast forward a little bit here, Jonathan, and let's kind of talk about what happened with you when you were a teenager. So what were some of the things that was going on?
So, I mean, I was in high school. I guess high school in the UK is a little different because you kind of start at about 12 years old. And then I kind of started having the same issues in that high school. I made a few friends, but they didn't understand why I couldn't associate with them outside of school. And that was difficult. And I just started getting into problem after problem, again, with bullying. Like I would get into fights. And at one point I got suspended for getting into a fight with somebody because of the bullying. And at the time I actually had some health issues that I was unaware of that I found out later when I was 17. And I was looking a little jaundice. So I was getting bullied for that too, on top of everything else. But as time progressed, I went out of that school. They homeschooled me for a while. And I think it was maybe 2 or 3 months. I can't remember the length of time that I was homeschooled. And then they decided to put me in a different school, just to do all the exams and things and get it done. I was 15 at the time. And I started seeing a girl at school. And I remember walking down the street with her and noticing a car of an elder driving past. And I knew straight away that he'd seen me. Not because of any indication, I just knew. And needless to say, I was pulled up on it and everything. And at the time I didn't want to stop seeing this girl because I really liked her. And basically my life was made hell at that point. And, up until then I was, pretty active in the sense I was going on the ministry. I was serving on the sound team and helping out in other areas. But I just at that point kind of disconnected from it. I was really starting to have doubts. And I got pulled up on the dating the girl and put under public reproof. So all of my privileges were stripped, couldn't do anything. And I went cold. And I went so cold to the point where I lost the relationship with the girl because I messed up. And it just kind of went downhill from there. And I got into a point where I was kind of just in limbo, I guess. And I'm still living with my parents, obviously. And so they just kept encouraging me to go back. And so, I kind of forced myself to do it, thinking that it was the right thing to do because that's what you're taught. And so I started going back. And at the time, we were going to a Spanish-speaking congregation to try and help there because we could speak Spanish. And it just didn't feel well, and with things at work as well, because I'd started working. This is when I was about 17. And I was constantly getting problems at work for bailing out on shifts that I had to work on Thursdays or Tuesday nights, because, back then there were still the Tuesday meetings. And then I had the issue with the health where I got severely ill and put into hospital, and it was due to gallstones. So I had to deal with all of that. And, from that point, I kind of just went from like the physically in, mentally out stage where I was just in it to appease my parents, really, or to just be able to keep that somewhat sense of normality of being able to communicate with family. But it just didn't feel good, and I had multiple issues in the congregation. I could never do anything right, even as hard as I tried. I was just constantly having problems.
You know what, Jonathan, just listening to what you're saying here, the Jehovah's Witnesses take something as normal as just having a friendship, or you're just interested in another person of the opposite sex. And everyone knows, because where I'm from, when I was old enough to, know what relationships were in high school, everybody was in some kind of a relationship.
Yeah.
And people who were not Jehovah's Witnesses, they supported their children in relationships. They went to the prom, they went to school dances, and they just had normal relationships with people of the opposite sex. And you were made to feel like it was dirty or bad or something like that, right?
Yeah.
But when you were dating this girl, or in a relationship, did you guys cross the watchtower boundaries or anything?
No,
Okay.
we didn't. We never got to that point. We just did all the usual, boyfriend girlfriend stuff. Go out places, go to the movies, hang out, watch stuff on TV. But yeah, I was really made to feel shameful about that, and it's something so normal, like you say.
Yeah. Well,
what about the public? So where did the public reproof part come in at? What made them put you on public reproof just for dating?
Just for dating a girl that's not a Jehovah's Witness.
What was the deal with that?
That's the only reason, because this specific elder saw me walking with this girl hand in hand, and that was it. That's all I had to do.
Oh, you were holding hands in public. Okay.
Yeah.
It's always the same thing. And keep in mind, you were getting baptized at 11.
Yeah.
So at that point, witnesses will say, well, you know what the rules are. You knew what you were supposed to do. You're 11 years old, right? And that's what happens. I remember elders would do something very similar. They would pull you to the side and they would ask you a very interesting question. So, Jonathan, what congregation is the little sister I saw you with the other day? It's the ultimate setup, and they know based on how she was dressed, they knew she ain't no sister, right? But they would, really skillful elders. These guys were good. They were really good. They would just lure you round in, and when they finish with you, man, they done dice you up and slice you up in so many pieces.
Oh my goodness.
You don't know anything. One of the things that you mentioned, and I can see how that would have impacted you, was when y'all moved to a different congregation. One of the things that you never got to see was your family's letter of introduction. And you can rest assured, you can take it to the bank. Any elder worth his weight, they wrote something in the letter about you. So the moment that the elders got the letter and it said, this young man, so and so and so and so, at that point, all the elders' antennas went up, alert, alert, alert. And they just simply start alerting all the families, all the kids, keep an eye on that young man. He's struggling right now. And everybody knows that's code. He's worldly. Don't mess with him. Don't invite him over. This organization, man, has they got some of the slickest stuff, man. It's unreal. And so you literally walked into a lion's den, and 2 or 3 weeks after your letter got there, however nicely they treated you before the letter came, you will be amazed how people are treated after the letter of introduction arrives, where the elders explain who, what you did and how you did and why and all that kind of stuff. It impacts people's lives for decades.
Right. And then too, you had I want to just kind of go back with what you said about your job. So you're experiencing all this stuff in school, celebrate, singing church hymns at an assembly, and now you're dating someone that's not a Jehovah's Witness. But now you're also starting to notice that I'm having issues. I can't work a certain shift on my job. So how did you? Do you want to give an experience about something about that to share with the audience?
Yeah. So I mean, I was actually going through college while I was doing work. And I started off my career working in a McDonald's because that was the easiest way to get, cash and be able to do college at the same time. But yeah, when they want you to do a late evening shift and it rolls into the meeting hours, it would be difficult to explain to them. And, I guess back then it was not so much about religious rights or anything like that. And it was kind of hard to justify because, they do the rotors in advance. And I guess I'd be forcing other people to have to take that shift. And of course, people frown on you for that because they're like, why am I getting made to do this time when this person doesn't do it at all? And there were some occasions where I just folded and said, you know what, just put me on the evening shift. And then I started getting flack from the other side from, my parents or the elders saying, why are you working on meeting nights? And I could never meet the satisfaction of either end. And that was just the tip of the iceberg with work interactions. As I moved from a different employer, I remember there being a time when I got along with most of the guys there, and we were just having a great conversation, great time at one point. I remember somehow, some way, it came up that I was a Jehovah's Witness, and I just remember seeing that guy's face. His total expression changed, and his opinion of me and everything just completely changed. He was like, it was almost like he was looking at the devil, and I've never forgotten that to this day because it just made me feel totally worthless. Like all of this time I built that relationship with that person, and now I'm just, nothing better than pretty much something on the side of the road.
Now,
you're dirt.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what? Now let's kind of keep on this. Let's keep on the track of the employment right now. We're gonna come out of bounds a little bit. We're gonna come out of the linear discussion of when you were a kid, but let's kind of double click on, your employment situation now, because you're from the UK, but you're living in the United States now.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to give us a little bit of history about how the Jehovah's Witnesses and these meetings were coming up to affect you here in the States?
So that's kind of an interesting part. So when I came here, I was inactive for a very long time. And I'd occasionally go to things like the memorial or special meetings just because my parents would twist my arm and I would be made to feel like I'm missing out on the ends near and everything, that we hear. But I was working in IT for a long time. That's what I went to college for and did everything. And thankfully, my parents were fairly supportive of that, which these days, education's frowned on. But I got this job with an American company, and I was based in the UK, and I was doing really well. And things just happened. So my boss left, and he basically vouched for me to come and take his position. And so I went through all of the visa process and everything and was approved for it and got brought over. And, from that point, I was completely on my own. I knew nobody here other than obviously work colleagues, which I had some relationship with them, but at the same time, I was their boss. So it's kind of hard to have that kind of relationship with, somebody that you manage. And so the time went on, and I was having regular FaceTime calls with my parents, because that's the only people I could really talk to. And they just kept kind of poking at me, why don't you go and find the Kingdom Hall that's close to you and talk to the brothers? And it kind of loomed over me, and I just kept thinking to myself, well, maybe it's different here. I'm in a completely different country. I'm about 4,000 miles away from home. And, people here are definitely different in that respect. They're a lot nicer. I hate to, classify the British people as kind of stuck up or anything, but that's my experience, at least living there for that length of time. So I eventually gave in, and I found it, and I went. And at first I felt okay. I was welcomed in, but then as the time progressed and I kept going, I got back into the same cycle, and they were trying to get me to do a Bible study and trying to get me to do the ministry and more. And then I just felt pressured, and they didn't seem to understand that, I had a very demanding job that I can't just drop things for. I mean, my employer paid a huge amount of money to get me over here, and I couldn't just leave that. And so I had difficulties with that already. And so, things went on, and I thought to myself, all right, if I'm really going to make a go of this, I need to come clean about stuff, because that's what I kept being told to do. So I did. I talked to one of the elders, and I said to him, I got stuff I need to get off my chest. And so I was pulled up in front of a judicial committee, and I'd never experienced that before. It felt like I was being interrogated by the police, if I was being honest. It was not a pleasant experience at all. So I told them everything. I was questioned about things in detail. And, they sent me out, and they were basically talking amongst themselves and making a decision. And, I wasn't disfellowshipped, but I was put under reproof. And that it didn't feel good. I didn't feel like I was being welcomed. And in the end, it felt like they just weren't trying to help me anymore. Like they just kind of washed their hands of me. And, I don't know what happened there, but it got to the point where I thought, no, I can't do this anymore. This is not what I expected. I thought it was going to be different. It's exactly the same. And I ousted myself. I was like, I'm done with this. I don't want to continue down this path of life because it doesn't feel good. And so I did the formal thing and did the letter and handed it in, and they did the process. And at the time I hadn't told my parents, and eventually I would have done. But I was trying to build up courage and, muster it up to talk to them about it. And that got taken away from me. Somehow, some way, it found its way back to the UK, to them. And then the next thing I know, I'm getting a text message from my dad, basically saying, you know what you've done? We're incredibly unhappy with you. Consider this the last communication from us. And that was it for a very long time.
Just a quick question. So how long had you been, because you were approved like when you was around 15, how long had you received all your privileges back before you ran into the second committee of elders that you had to deal with?
I never got my privileges back. I was constantly in an out stage after that point, where I would go back maybe for a few months, or something, and then go inactive for a year or so. And within this time, I still had communication with family. It was somewhat normal. It got to the point where my parents wouldn't talk to me about things, about the witnesses or the religion in general, because they knew how I felt about it. They didn't pressure me in that sense. Kind of grateful for that. But they, every now and again, would drop something just to try and kind of incentivize me to do something. And that would be what would kind of bring me back for a temporary period.
Yeah. Do you know if the elders try to get in contact with your former congregation of elders? Because generally that's what they'll do. And of course, many times there's no records, or if the records they can't do, they'll just move forward. I've known them do that as well. But many times they'll try to, we want to write your old congregation. Do you know if they try to do that by any chance?
I'm not 100% sure, but I would have imagined so. I would imagine they probably would have got in touch with the Bethel at London and tried to get records from that way.
Yeah. So basically, they end up just reaffirming the reproof that the other congregation had established. Yeah.
Right. But like, let me ask you this: when you decided to, because you said you ousted yourself, and just for our audience, I'm just clarifying that you wrote a letter of disassociation. Is that what you did? Okay.
That's what I did.
Now, when you did that at that point, had you been on the internet to do any research about this religion? Were you just doing this sheerly on your personal experience, or had you been educating yourself about the group?
No, I'd never really looked into things until after that point, because when my dad did that text message like that, I was furious. I was really angry. And I guess I just couldn't understand how a parent that's connected by blood, DNA, would just be able to shut somebody out like that based on a religious teaching. And at that point is where I started to kind of just dive more into it, really, because there was a lot of stuff that I never really understood. And then the more I kind of digged into it, the more my eyes are opened, and I never look back. Like I could never go back to that. I'd prefer to jump off a cliff, to be truthfully honest.
But it's interesting that now that I'm getting a light bulb moment here in what you're saying too, because when you are raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and in my family, my mother never went back to reinforce what I learned at the Kingdom Hall. So I don't know if she understood what I understood or what I was comprehending. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times we just think we're just taking our kids to the meeting, and they're just sitting there. But if your parents don't really say, "Hey, Johnny, hey, Kathy, did you understand what the brother said from the platform? Do you understand why we don't celebrate holidays, why we don't do these things?" They just assume you're at the meeting, so you understand.
Oh, yeah.
But like you're saying, how could my father cut me off? How can he cut off his bloodline?
Yeah.
So just listening to you talking, it's like we just assume that everybody understands that. You know what I mean?
Right.
So once you got on the internet and you were able to do research, what's kind of going through your mind? Are you connecting dots better?
Yeah, I'm telling you.
Based on that?
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, I came across you guys and I started watching all of your content, and I was like, wow. Like you said, connecting the dots. And I'm like, I never thought about that before. And for example, I never knew, because one of the big things that was kind of stuck in my mind was, why did they disfellowship people? So I kind of dug into that. I came across your video as well. And I never knew that they published something back in 1947 about basically just bashing Catholics about their excommunication practice. And then 4 or 5 years later, witnesses start doing it. And I'm like, that's not right. How can you do that? And I mean, they'll try and defend it all day, saying that this fellowshipping is different. But when you look at the same, side by side, it's exactly the same thing. So that was one big thing for me. And then I started to think more about things like, at the conventions when the governing body would release things like New Light. And then I started thinking back about previous New Light. And I'm like thinking to myself, how could the one true religion keep altering its beliefs to fit today's agenda or today's world circumstances? And, just for a recent thing that I found out, for example, like I know that they're focusing on the Ukraine and Russia being the king of the north. And I never really understood any of that. But just the fact that they were focusing on it and saying that Russia is the king of the north. And then I looked it up. And in the past, they had tagged Germany, Hitler, and Italy and the Catholic Church as the king of the north. So I'm like, how can this stuff keep changing? It either is or it isn't. And it's all of this stuff that I kept finding that it's like, it became clear to me that this is not divine influence on 8 people at work. This is human opinion. And I'm not going to follow that. So.
Yeah, it's like anybody who does computer code, ones and zeros, it's either is or not. There is no in between.
Yeah.
And that's really kind of, my lady C and I, we often laugh. That's kind of how our channel came about. We just never critically thought about a lot of the stuff that we were taught. Like she said, parents just assume, well, you were at the Kingdom Hall with me, so you never heard it. And that's what they'll tell kids. You heard the same thing I heard. But the difference is I didn't understand the thing they were saying. And those are two different things. I heard it, but I didn't understand it. And that's kind of the way it works in the witness religion. People are sitting in the audience hearing this stuff, but for most of the friends, like you said, the King of the North, average witness can't explain. And that's why today it's just wonderful. I mean, it's wonderful today because all you got to do is say, go to jw.org. You don't have to be able to explain anything today. So they're literally developing a lower cognitive audience than they had in the past. I mean, when I was coming along, and you remember, we had all that kind of stuff, the wheel inside of a wheel and the eyes in the rim. But today, the witness just, as one witness told us, it's like cotton candy. Cotton candy. It's not steak and potatoes.
and then too, in your experience, Jonathan, I also find that it's not until you get a bad experience that you actually begin to research, that you begin to open your eyes up to what's going on around you at the Kingdom Hall. Now, you mentioned that you guys were in a Spanish congregation in the UK. Before you went to that congregation, were there very many young people in the congregation that you came from? And how about the number of young people in the Spanish congregation?
There was not that many. Of my age, there might have been 1 or 2, but there were girls. In terms of boys, they were very young, or 4 or 5 years younger than me at that time. And then in the Spanish congregation, there was 2.
Wow.
One boy and one girl that were a similar age. So there's really not much. Like, you're encouraged to try and make friends amongst the witness kids, but there's not, if you don't gel with that person either, you're kind of stuck. So
big time.
And not only that, but just listen to what you're saying. And I feel the same way because we didn't have that many in my congregation either. But see, then there's the isolation there. You got 1 or 2 people there. They're not the same age. They don't have the same interests. But because you're Jehovah's Witnesses, you're supposed to be, looking at them as people that you can actually, be around. And I remember this one friend of mine who I look at today that even if she left the Jehovah's Witnesses, I would not want to be friends with her because she was toxic. She was very jealous. She was one of those people that was always one up on somebody. So even if she wasn't a witness, that would have probably been her personality type. So, but then you're thrust into this group of people and now you're expected that this is going to be your playmates or your association, Now, what about, you talked about moving from the UK to the United States. You're talking to your parents. This is your communication, your channel of communication is your parents over 4,000 miles away.
Right.
So when you moved to the United States, how did you eventually begin to meet people and feel like you could be a part of some type of a community?
So I started to really just interact more with work colleagues. After work, we'd go out for drinks, or we'd get a dinner somewhere at a restaurant and just interact that way. And I typically always felt easier with people outside of the congregation. Like I could just talk to them like normal. I didn't feel like I had to keep up, I don't want to say like a fake appearance, but try and be something that I'm not. And for that reason, I just gelled well. And, I have a pretty good relationship with a lot of people at work today. And, I've made quite a few friends that are not at my company. And I, do things like golf and play baseball and stuff like that. And it's great. I just feel like myself. And I've been able to develop multiple relationships like that.
And it's good to hear you say that, because if you were going to a therapist and you began to tell them about how bad your life was or how depressed you are, the first thing they're going to start to ask you is, what is your life like? What are you doing in your life? And then when people start talking about their lives as Jehovah's Witnesses, how there's always some kind of detective or elder, sleuthing around in their lives, trying to find out what they're doing bad so that they can now get them disfellowshipped. And they always feel like they're under some kind of radar where someone's going to turn them in at the drop of a hat.
Yep.
So that could be really stressful for just anybody, So I know exactly how you feel, because when I worked in my previous jobs, I got a chance to go out to lunch and dinner with coworkers and just be able to be myself. And nobody was trying to probe in my life to find out what I was doing, what I wasn't doing, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it felt like you say, it was just constant state of feeling judged and monitored, like under a microscope all the time. And that to me was just no fun, no way of living.
Yeah. The interrogation always continues. Yeah.
So then, now what are you currently doing? Are you currently married now?
I've been married for 3 years. We have a foster child right now that we're going to adopt at some point soon. So everything's pretty much set in place and going really well right now. Nobody's life's perfect, obviously, but this is the happiest I've ever been in comparison to the rest of my early childhood years and adulthood, I guess.
Now, so you say you're married and everything. So how did you meet your wife?
Yeah.
And what was can you give us a little bit of history about, because I'm assuming your wife is not one of Jehovah's Witnesses because you disassociated.
Yeah.
So you want to give us a little bit of story and, what does she think about the religion and how did all those turn of events happen?
Sure. So we met through eHarmony. So, I just went for a dating service and I thought, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to try it, and go full-fledged in. So I scoped them all out and I thought eHarmony seems like a good one. You pay for the service, you're going to get a genuine person, hopefully on the other side. And we matched through all of the questions that it asks you. And, we had our first date and things just went really well. We gelled really well. So the site did its job. And we dated for about a year, and then we got engaged. And after that, we eloped, and we just both agreed that that was like the best way, just under the radar kind of thing. No family, friends, just went to the courthouse and got married and made a really good day of it. But throughout the time that I'd been dating Colleen, she obviously had questions about my parents, because she knew that something wasn't right, because every time she brought them up, I would get upset. Like, I would get physically, visually, like, distraught and, don't want to talk about it kind of thing. And eventually I caved, and I told her, like, I didn't want to tell you this because I was afraid of rejection, because in the past that had been an issue. And she was pretty understanding, like, because she deeply cared for me and she loved me, and she didn't have an issue with it, but she didn't fully understand things until I really explained it to her. And when I did, like every other person, she just thought it was ridiculous. She couldn't understand how parents could just disconnect from a child because of their beliefs, and just shut them out completely. And she was pretty angry about the whole thing too. And then, things kind of were difficult for her too, because to this day, she's never met them. I mean, she's talked to them through, video chat, but my parents had an opportunity to meet her in person back in 2020, January. And this is how strongly she feels about the situation, because at the time, this was just before COVID. She basically said to them, look, it's fine that you want to talk to Jonathan now and meet me, but if you're not going to continue this kind of normal interaction, I don't want to even do this. And parents didn't cave. And for that reason, she never got to meet them in person, which is sad, because, you would think they'd want to meet their daughter-in-law in person. But they, neither party never got that opportunity. And I feel sorry for my wife more than anything. She's had that stolen from her to a degree. But, COVID changed things a little bit, but it's not the same, obviously. So, I mean, to this day, she doesn't like the situation. She doesn't hate my parents, but she definitely doesn't like the whole. She has a very fond, I don't want to say hatred, but getting close to that, of religion and the witnesses for the situation that it put me in.
Oh yeah, the witnesses, man. I'm gonna tell you, your wife not having a relationship. We know people like yourself. They have children. Their children have not met their grandparents because of the stand that they take. And like you said, they don't back down. And this is shocking to people who are not familiar with witnesses. I mean, they're like, what? And especially the reason, because they're seeing you as basically an honest person, get up, go to work every day. You ain't trying to move, 3 or 4 kilos every month. You're a good person. And they're trying to understand, okay, now what is he doing that's so bad that his mom and his daddy don't want to talk to him, and they don't see it. And that's what causes people who are not witnesses to literally be able to sympathize. Like you said, you were afraid to tell her because you know how it is. And the experience you had is very, very common. When you share, and we tell people, talk to people who are not witnesses, and you will be shocked how they will be understanding, like, man, I didn't know.
Right.
And the support they'll give you is, go ahead.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Keep going. The support they give you is what now?
No, I was just saying the support. Go ahead. You ready? Mm-hmm. Okay. And so the support that they will give you is really unreal. And that's what makes this thing work.
Right. Well, I was going to ask the question. You mentioned that you all dated for a year. She would ask you questions about your family. When did she find out that you were dealing with the Jehovah's Witness? issue, was it before or after you got married?
It was before. I mean, it was probably about 6 months in. She had moved in with me, and she'd been living with me for about 3 months, and I just couldn't. I couldn't keep it anymore to myself. It wasn't fair on her, and I caved and I told her everything, and she was incredibly understanding, and supportive of me. She obviously doesn't get why they treat me the way they do, but yeah.
And what about therapy? Did you ever decide to talk to a therapist about your situation? Because you're really dealing with a lot here. It's not just dealing with your parents not talking to you and everything. It's about the issues that you had in your childhood and your formative years, where you had these bad experiences that could actually just come back to just haunt you at any time, when something could trigger that. Something in your day-to-day life could just trigger one of those experiences. So did you ever get any help at any time?
I didn't. In hindsight, I wish I had, because it would have helped a lot. But what I did instead was just threw myself head forward into my career and just focused on that, and kind of let that be the distraction. And, you probably see from the background, I have a lot of hobbies. So I kept myself kind of just busy and not allowing myself to think about it really. And I guess that's kind of been how I've been in the past, because something I have not mentioned is my brother and sister have pretty big age gaps between us. My sister is, she's going to be 46, and my brother is 52, I believe, or 51. So we've pretty big gaps. So I kind of felt like I didn't have really any, I don't want to say siblings, but not kids that I would play and interact with, like, kids of 2, 4, or, a small age gap. And so I've been pretty self-sufficient in the sense of being able to just be my own friend, I guess, because of experiences in life. And I use that to keep me sane to a degree.
Yeah.
But we've talked recently about getting me going to see an individual therapist, because it's had an impact to a degree on my ability to be a parent. I'm not saying I'm a bad parent, but there's a lot of things that I guess subconsciously still have issues with, and it reflects in the way that I am, I'm a parent to the foster child that we're going to adopt. So, we're doing therapy for him as a group, and a lot of the things that I discussed with the therapist for him are actually issues with me. So there's still lingering issues there. So yeah, in answer to your question, it has come up, and I think I am going to do it because I think it'd be beneficial to me.
Absolutely, because I hear what you're saying. You're saying, do you see all these things behind me, my guitars or whatever, and you're looking at it from the angle of, I found something to keep myself busy, and eventually it's going to come full circle. So you're giving yourself things to do. You're making yourself busy, and you're trying not to address the underlying current in your life, which is a good thing to do things and keep your mind off of it. But you really need to, like you said, get that therapy to be able to talk through it. I think that's why I love our channel so much, because the feedback that we get from people, that when they hear experiences like yours, a lot of times it's like, they're like, that's my exact situation. I went through that.
Yeah.
And to hear someone else relate the experience, and maybe a lot of people may not be able to express it the way some of our guests have, and they've been able to explain it, and it really just unravels the situation for them to say, wow, somebody else went through the same thing I did, but they even encapsulated the story to fit what I was dealing with. And I think this is therapy too. Just being on a program like this and telling people, and it's therapy for you and the person receiving it.
Yeah, and I mean that's partially why I reached out to you guys, because I wanted my experience to be useful to somebody else.
And it will be.
You know, getting cut off from family and friends is devastating. The feeling is unlike anything else. It's like having your heart ripped out, literally. And to a degree, you know, being 4,000 miles away with nobody else made it a degree worse. And, you know, I got through it. I'm, like I said before, I'm the happiest I've ever been. And, you know, the way that the witnesses paint the world is not real. You know, they painted it as a wicked place, that there's nothing good out there. You can't enjoy or have happiness outside of the witnesses. It's just simply not true. You know, so for anybody that is going through a similar life experience, I hope it's beneficial to them.
Yeah. Lady C often refers to one of the references that the Watchtower made, that you cannot live a normal life. And so as a result of that, that's what we never lived. We never lived a normal life of just interacting and dealing with people and having friends and doing things without this thing hanging over our head of you're not doing enough. Mm-hmm. This constant run faster, jump higher is what drives witnesses literally crazy, because you will never jump high enough and you will never run fast enough. And so you will find yourself literally just in the hamster wheel. We've seen the hamster wheel. He will never get to the end of the wheel. He'll just keep spinning around. And that's the way it is for the life of a Jehovah's Witness. They literally, and that's very important what you made the point about. You recognize that with helping your foster child, it ends up helping you. And that's why, you know, we talk to people. For many people, when they come on a program like this, and we see on other channels as well, oftentimes that is literally the first time these individuals have ever told their story, just talked through what their life was like. And it's amazing, like Lady C said, the feedback you get, like, I just never realized, you know, how this thing just really threw me for a loop growing up as a kid, into my adulthood, into the type of relationships I've had, husband, wives, girlfriends. It impacts every aspect of our life, because it becomes literally what we make decisions on. And that's really the thing. Everything you make, every decision that we make, basically speaking, is always made in the context of the Watchtower. Almost practically everything, careers, jobs, clothes, music, everything is always in that context for the most part.
Well, I know for me, just a trigger word when we left the religion, or trigger days on the calendar, were meeting nights. You know, it's like when we first left the religion, Tuesday and Thursday. It was like, if somebody invited us out on a Tuesday or Thursday night, I was like, that's my night. I ain't got to go nowhere on a Tuesday or Thursday. Oh my God. Or when we had to go to college and we had to go in person, it was like, don't be on a Tuesday or Thursday. Make it any night but that. But it was like, it was kind of crazy when you think about it.
It was.
How you're thinking about those nights were like, oh, dreadful. You know, I didn't want to go nowhere on Tuesday and Thursday night, you know?
Right. I mean, the one thing.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, the one thing I was going to say is the one thing that's been constant throughout my entire life and experience being a witness is that I always felt like I was living a life with a loaded gun to my head. And I'm not sure if that's how others have felt, but the constant fear that was putting to me, like, if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, you know, going on the doors, trying to do everything you can, doing, you know, keep doing more and more and more, that you're going to be destroyed. And I mean, that's no way of living, you know, and that was one of the things that I ended up researching after I, you know, disassociated. And I was like, this can't be right. How can a loving God, you know, want to destroy you just because you want to live a happy life? It doesn't make sense. You know, parents, when they have kids, can be selfless and giving. You know, you don't hold your kids to ransom once you've had them. And like, if you're not going to do what I tell you to do, you're going to die. I'm going to kill you. That's not how it works. How is it that humans can do that, but God expects different? And, that was one of the revelations I came to. And it was, again, one of those things, living in fear all the time of being a witness.
Yeah, that can be very, very stressful. And when you're raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, because this is all for people that are born in, especially, and when they reinforce that, and you think it's normal for people to treat people like that. I mean, I know you said that it didn't seem right, but it's like a cognitive dissonance thing going on. You know it's not right, but you know it is right. Because they keep telling you it's the truth. This is the truth.
Right.
And so then they keep on saying it's the truth. This is the right thing to do. But then the human side comes out and you're like, but wait a minute. That don't seem right. So you're constantly having that struggle. But with your wife, I know it has to be difficult for her, because when you get married, let's say you got two people coming together. And one person, they never really had that family structure that they always wanted. So they find Mr. Right or Miss Right, and they're like, oh, I'm going to get married. I'm going to finally marry into a family where the family is going to have a good family background. How about your wife? Are her parents still living? Does she have a good relationship with her family? What's that like?
So on my wife's side, both her parents are still alive. They are divorced. So she has obviously some of her own upbringing, trauma from that experience. But from her dad's side, her dad was raised Catholic, and to this day wants nothing to do with religion, because he had a very bad negative experience with his upbringing due to being raised Catholic. On Colleen's mom's side, she's not really religious in any way, and for that reason, Colleen's kind of she is the way she is. She's kind of neutral in that sense. She respects other people's beliefs, but into specific things like JW, she wants nothing to do with it. So we see very clearly eye to eye on that, which is great.
Well, that's good. And what about family reunions or family get-togethers on your wife's side? Are you all involved with her family in that manner, and holidays and stuff? Because you can't do that in your family.
No, I can't. No, it's been really nice. We do the Thanksgiving. We go around for Christmas, and Mother's Day, Father's Day, all of these great things. I have a blast with Halloween with the kid, and just getting him dressed up and having fun. That's what it's about.
Yeah, so many basic things. I mean, just like I said, things are just normal. Saturday morning, kids going out to the soccer field or going to play little league or whatever, just normal stuff. Instead, witness kids are dressed up in 3-piece suit and tie on a vest. I mean, you 8 years old. And you 8 years old. You 8 years old with a briefcase in your hand. I mean, I look back, man. I mean, it's amazing, man, because I look back and it's hard to believe, because when I was growing up, you couldn't get the little cool portfolios to carry. You had to carry a man-sized bag, and you looked like a fool out there. I mean, it was crazy, but we didn't know, and that's the whole thing. Now that we do, as they say, know better, do better, and so that's really what it's all about.
That's
I don't
true.
like wearing ties to this day for that reason.
See, they're triggered. And we noticed that too. Like anything you could not do in the Jehovah's Witnesses, you did it. And one of the things I did was I immediately replaced my entire wardrobe with pants. I would have slacks. I mean, I just did not wear dresses and stuff, And so it was just crazy, It was crazy.
Yeah. It is amazing. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's just amazing.
So, Jonathan, do you have any parting words or any words of wisdom that you would like to share? Anything that we didn't discuss in your story and with our audience?
I guess, for anybody else out there in similar situations, it's lighter on the other side for sure. It's not the painted picture that the witnesses paint. And things will be rough initially from the separation, but they will get better and continue to get better. There is a lot to enjoy in life. And, not everybody's situation is the same, but you can definitely make it your own and, just live your life out to the fullest that you want. I know that this may eventually somehow find its way back to my parents somehow in one way or another. I really don't know, but I've come to peace with, leaving that part of my life behind and moving forward. And that would be my advice to anybody else out there that's in a similar situation. Look forward, not backwards.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people we interview say. They realize that someone may run across this video and see their son, their daughter, but they're at peace because they're at the point in their life where they realize, I cannot change. I cannot pull my parents out. I can't pull my sister out and brother out. They will each have to do their own critical thinking and come to their own conclusions like I have. And I think that is so important. And the point that you made, which is what we stress all the time, that there is life outside of Watchtower. It really is. It really is.
Right. So, Jonathan, would you like, if there's anybody that wants to talk to you and ask questions, would you be willing to leave an email with us that we can put in the description?
Yeah,
and if somebody who could kind of like relate to your story might want to reach out and kind of talk to you.
Yeah, no problem at all.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
All right. So we hope that you all enjoyed this discussion with Jonathan. And if you would like to learn more, maybe connect with him because you have some questions about his story, or maybe you know him from the UK and you're a PMO and you want some help. We're going to leave his email address in the description below. And this has been Lady C.
And this has been JT.
And thank you so much for being in our audience.
All right. Take care.
This program was sponsored by Critical Thinkers.